Welcome back to Crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm Corbin Smith from Locked On Seahawks. Glad to be teaming up with Travis Rogers from Locked On Rams. And a special thanks to all the 12s and Rams fans that are listening. And thanks for making Locked On Seahawks and Locked On Rams your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. Fast forwarding to Sunday, let's talk some keys to victory for these two teams. Travis, going to start with the Rams, who are coming in hot. They've won their last two games. They get that huge win in primetime at Minnesota against the Vikings. When you look at this first matchup against the Seahawks, what are a few things that jump out to you think the Rams absolutely have got to do to go into Lumen Field and get the victory?
Well, I think it's something that you mentioned a couple of times, Corbin, and that's don't let the Seahawks find their run game. This is something that the Rams have struggled with for most of the season. Most teams have been able to run it on them. And I think one of the ways that they'll be able to do that, if it's going to work out, is they need to play with a lead. You know, when the Rams can play with a lead and other teams have to chase, their inability to stop the run becomes a lot less problematic because teams are trying to pass to get back into the game against them. When the Rams defense knows that their opposition is in a passing situation, they become pretty good. They have some guys that can get to the quarterback. I mentioned Jared Verse earlier. He's been terrific. Byron Young had a pretty good game against the Vikings last week. You're starting to see Kobe Turner, Jared Verse kind of bring their games around. So I think it kind of starts right there. I think the Rams offense will be good. You know, I kind of always come back to this. Sean McVay, Matthew Stafford is a very good combination to start with. As long as there's people to throw the ball to, I think the offense will be fine. The question is whether or not they can stop anybody. They did a really good job against a Minnesota team that had been playing pretty well for most of the season. So I think it starts right there. If they can control the running game defensively, I think they're in a pretty good spot.
Yeah, for the Seahawks, they got to be able to run the damn football. I mean, it's been one game after another where they have not been able to find it, or it's waited till the second half that they can get their run game going. If there's a game that they can get their rushing attack going, it's got to be this one. I mean, the Rams have got extensive games this year where they have not been able to stop the run. And these two teams have been very similar in that regard on defense. And I'm looking at it also from a play action standpoint, because you mentioned this earlier. Getting Darius Williams back has really helped in that secondary, but you don't have a Jalen Ramsey anymore in that secondary. There's injuries at the safety position. There's been defections in free agency. This still feels like a group, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but at least before the last couple of weeks, they were giving up a lot of big plays in the passing game downfield. Feels like plays can be there. And if you have DK Metcalf back, you have Jack Smith and Jigba, you have Tyler Lockett against that secondary. Darn it, if you can just run the ball just good enough that the play action is believable and he can run some play action under center and take those shots, that's going to be a big deal. As far as the defensive side of things, look, I'm calling out a couple guys right now. Leonard Williams, Jared Reed, and Byron Murphy II. By most accounts, this has been a solid group this year. Their interior defensive line has been a strength for this football team. It was not last week against the Buffalo Bills. All three of those players were non-existent. They were completely silenced by Buffalo's offensive line. You're playing a Rams offense that's missing their starting center and starting right guard. And I know they're playing better the last couple of weeks, but you've got some high-priced guys. You've got a player in Byron Murphy that was picked in the top 16 selections that you expected to be a game changer. Those guys need to play to that level when you're playing backups. They need to take the game over, and they need to get pressure on Matthew Stafford, speed up his clock, because he has shown throughout his career and early this year especially, I know he was missing receivers, but he will take some chances when pressure's bearing down, and he will throw it into traffic. The Seahawks, they've got to find a way to use pressure to create a turnover or two in this game. And if they do get those turnovers, they got to score off of them. So this has just been the issue with the Seahawks team. When they do get a big play, they can't capitalize on it. Yeah. You have to be able to do that against the Rams. You've got to take advantage of the mismatch that you've got in the interior of the defensive line against that injury-battered offensive line. If they can't do that in this game, then I don't know if they can get this defense fixed moving into the second half of the season.
Yeah, the Rams have had a little bit of luck, not against Minnesota, but in the previous 2 weeks, the Rams had not scored on defense in over a year, and they scored on defense in consecutive games against what we saw against the Raiders and the Packers the week before that. And then last week, they didn't take it away necessarily, but they do feel like they're starting to come together a little bit in what was, I think, through the first 4 or 5 weeks of the season, this was, quite frankly, there's no other way to put it, a bad defense. And now it's a below average defense. And below average occasionally is okay in the NFL as long as the other side is carrying their weight. And I think this is a huge game for the Rams because they win 3 in a row. That felt like mission impossible just a month ago. May not win 3 games the rest of the year is what it felt like. And to be able to win 3 in a row, you've mentioned several times, to get back to 500 for the Rams, to get out of that last place spot that they've been in for a long time. And depending on how the rest of the week goes in the division, the Rams could be near the top of the division. They got a Miami team coming in after that on Monday Night Football, a chance to maybe take advantage of that. The Patriots after that. So they could get a little bit of momentum going here, but this is the one, because you lose this one, you're back at 3-5. You're still a couple of weeks away from 500 at best. This is a huge game for the Rams.
Going into this game, the Seahawks are 1.5-point favorites. I'm going to be honest with you, I'm stunned with the way that Seattle's played at home. I mean, they have been abysmal at home. Honestly, I think they'd be better just saying, can we play both games down at SoFi Stadium right now? Because they have been that bad at home. Yeah. Their home field advantage is gone. They have had an invasion of road fans. If the Rams fans do that in this game, then we know we've got a real issue.
I think you're okay.
In the Pacific Northwest. But 1.5-point favorites, I'm actually really surprised with the way that they played last week, that's where things stand. And yet, from a spread perspective, I actually think there's a decent chance they can cover that. I actually think that Seattle matches up better with this Rams team than what they did with the Buffalo Bills last week from a personnel standpoint. Now, does that mean that I necessarily think they're going to win? I'm not going to say right now whether I think they're going to win or not, but I could see them cover. I could also see this game getting away from them if they are not able to stop the run and they're not able to pressure Matthew Stafford. Then maybe it is like that 2017 game and things end up just going into blowout city the way they did last week against the Bills. So this team is not one that I would recommend putting any bets on because you just don't know what you're going to get.
You beat me to it. This is a run for the hills. I'm no help here because the Rams have played close games all season long. They've had one game that was kind of lopsided. They were on the wrong end of that Arizona game early in the year where they didn't look good at all. But every time I'm feeling pretty good about the Rams, they show up and they give you something less than their best. And right when you're just about to say, okay, forget these guys, they're never going to figure it out, they show up and they do something like they did against Minnesota. So still trying to figure out what they are with their new guys back. But that 1.5 feels about right because that feels where just about every other Rams game lands, and they're due to play a very close game, I think.
Looking forward to seeing a close game because, look, Seattle's had some big losses this year. It has not been fun for Seahawks fans, but they're hoping that they can get a little bit of momentum going here at home. And for goodness sakes, can they beat Matthew Stafford for once? Because it has not happened since Matthew Stafford came to the Rams. He's 4-0. They're going to be looking to try to snap that this weekend, but should be a good game between two teams that are trending in opposite directions. And Seahawks looking to get things right. The Rams looking to stay hot. And, of course, a chance for NFC West supremacy in a very tight division.